Canadians want the best for Afghanistan, but what's the best way for Canada to help? On last night's National, we heard how important steps have been taken over the past 6.5 years, but that serious challenges remain. The Taliban are still powerful. Large areas of the country are now under their influence. Corruption is rampant, and Canadian soldiers have already paid a heavy price. So what's the next step? We invited 3 people with 3 different answers to make their best cases. Stephen Staples, he's a specialist in defense, disarmament, and international trade issues. He's worked with a number of think tanks. He's now the president and director of the Rideau Institute.
I'll be honest. If I was a member of Parliament and I was asked to extend this combat mission beyond 2009, I would vote no. Let's face it, the war is not going well. We've lost 79 lives since 2002, and we're spending $100 million a month on the full cost of the war. Still, the Manley panel found that security has generally deteriorated in the south and east of Afghanistan, including Kandahar province, where Canadian troops are based, in 2006 and 2007. Frankly, there's been little military progress. Some of our soldiers have died retaking areas we had previously held in the last 2 years. It is so bad that U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates accused us of over-relying on airstrikes instead of combat in order to avoid Canadian casualties. Airstrikes result in more civilian deaths, turning the people against us. Oxfam reports that last year, 1,200 civilians died in the conflict. As many were killed in military operations by Afghan and international forces as from insurgent attacks. But the word that everyone is thinking and is afraid to say is defeat. John Manley said that the mission is in jeopardy and we may not succeed. Britain's Paddy Ashdown was more blunt. He said defeat was a real possibility and we will lose if we do not start doing things differently. And that's where the Manley panel let us down the most. They urged Canada to continue fighting a war no one can win, rather than focusing on the obvious solution, a negotiated settlement of the conflict. President Karzai is in favor of negotiations. In September, he said he wanted to talk to the insurgents. The Taliban seems ready too. In response to Karzai's overture, a Taliban spokesman said they were prepared to accept the government, but wanted the foreign troops out. It's what the people want. A recent poll found Afghans support foreign troops, but 74% also approved of negotiations between the Karzai government and the Taliban. In Kandahar, where Canadians are fighting, approval jumped to 85%. And the international community is finally catching on. British Prime Minister Gordon Brown and U.S. officials have endorsed a notion of a reconciliation process with former Taliban fighters who have no ties to al-Qaeda and accept Afghanistan's constitution. So if war is politics by another means, then we need to show both sides they can achieve more through talking than fighting. Better to have leaders inside the room shouting than outside shooting at each other. But they can't do it alone. They need a high-level, impartial envoy to get started. First would be talks with as many former warring factions as possible, a ceasefire, and then a disarming of militias. The United Nations could play a role in helping the peace process along and contribute blue helmet troops to provide security, possibly from Muslim countries. Sadly, the Canadian government has been wasting time, stamping its feet in a huff, squandering our influence. Canadians expect better. We invented peacekeeping. We banned landmines. Canada has a track record for finding diplomatic solutions to tough military problems. Where are our diplomats when we need them? I'm convinced that soon there will be peace talks in Afghanistan. Canada should be leading the way. Let's honor those who have given so much. We can help the men and women of Afghanistan by ending the war and bringing about a lasting peace.
We're going to hear from Sally Armstrong next. Author, teacher, human rights activist, filmmaker. She's a person of many talents. She's also a member of the Order of Canada and a winner of an Amnesty International Award.
I began reporting from Afghanistan soon after the Taliban took over and created a human rights catastrophe for the women and girls. It's through that lens that I have followed the fledgling development, the sometimes disastrous setbacks, and the flickering hopes for peace. I'm making the case that to leave when the job is half done would be a calamity for Afghans. What's more, would give a black eye to Canada. This is a country that most Canadians couldn't have found on a map 7 years ago. Now, we can't get Afghanistan out of the news, off our minds, away from our tax dollars. Many are asking what we think we're doing in a quite primitive country, half a world away, that seems to be bent on self-destruction. The simple answer is this. We're helping them to rebuild, as we promised we would in the Bonn Agreement in November 2001, and protecting ourselves, as we discovered we must in the traumatized aftermath of 9/11. The rhetoric in the debate needs to address the facts. First, we did not invade Afghanistan. We were invited by the government to help them establish security. 2, we're not occupying Afghanistan. And 3, apart from the extremists, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single Afghan who wants Canada to leave. In fact, they're terrified that we might. Everyone knows that if the international community pulls out, the fighting will resume within 24 hours. What we are doing has produced some excellent results. The Independent Afghanistan Human Rights Commission, for example, is seen as a stunning success story. The current work to reform family law is complicated but vitally important. 6 million children are in school. That's a start. But 6 years of combined effort from the international community has not significantly altered the lives of Afghans. Consider that we are investing in Afghanistan only 1/25 the troops and 1/50th the aid that we put into Kosovo and Bosnia. It's time to think outside the box. And that's what all the elements, the UN, NATO, and the NGOs seem to be doing. They're addressing the fact that the initial plan simply hasn't worked well enough. This is not a post-conflict country. It is war devastated in ways the international community hasn't seen in 60 years. It's important to understand that the Taliban insurgency is mostly confined to the 4 southern provinces of the country, while the other 30 provinces have confounding challenges to overcome: out-of-control warlords, drug barons, brutal tribal customs, and a dysfunctional justice system. It's fair to say that apart from the insurgency in the south, the rest of the country is marginally better off, with an elected government and an infrastructure that's starting to improve. The size of the task is immense, but it has begun. Beating the Taliban isn't the issue. That's like saying you can defeat the mafia. But what you can do is drive them back into their caves and keep them there until the government can get on its feet and a national army can be trained. These are not overnight tasks. For me, the success can be measured by the treatment of the women and girls, their opportunities for education, for participating safely in civil society, and the way they're treated by the judiciary. They are the canaries in the mine that is Afghanistan.